right, everyone. G'day and welcome back to another episode of Got the 4 Points. It's been another big week in local footy, and we're happy to bring you lots of exciting local footy news this week. There's been some very close results, Pete. There's been some blowouts. We sincerely hope that your team did better on Saturday than Peter Dutton. So let's just get all the politics right out of the way. It was election weekend. We're into mid-May, Pete, and it kind of still feels a bit like mid-March. Unbelievable weather out there. We hope everyone's having a good time and your footy team's getting the 4 points. How are you, mate?
Yeah, doing well, thanks. It's been a busy week. It's been pretty crazy. So we'll get an episode out, and hopefully it'll still be up there for what people are wanting. But I know both you and I have been pretty busy. But you're right, footy's cracking on, and it does feel a little bit more like it's still March, and maybe still a little bit more like it's cricket tennis season. But yeah, bring on the wet weather, I say. I want some wet weather games. I want some hard contested ball, and I want some muddy shirts, and I want the classic back pocket or forward pocket that hasn't gotten muddy yet, purposely diving to the ground just so they can get some mud on the jumper and not draw the ire of the coach and other
Mm,
players. But how have you been, mate?
I'm good. Yeah, going well. I always used to love the wet weather footy, Pete. It brought everybody back to my level. That's one of those
Same.
great cliches in local sport. But yes, we haven't had any really. We had one sort of wet day, in which we were very happy because the Uni Blacks got a big win. But yes, looking like another beautiful day around Victoria for football. Yeah, going well, as you said, been a pretty busy week, but we're pretty excited for the Blacks playing Collegians this weekend, and pretty excited also to know what's been catching your eye, mate, in local footy. What's going on?
Yeah, there's been a few things that have been catching my eye, Rob. The first thing I noticed was opening the Weekly Times, which is always a great paper for local footy. The Weekly Times always do great coverage. If you're a footballer, a local footballer or a farmer, the Weekly Times is for you. And I opened up the sports section. I saw a familiar face, Rob. One of our primary school mates, John Howarth, who is now an AFL umpire. He's umpired over 100 games of AFL, and he umpired the North Melbourne Essendon game on the Thursday night. Which, mind you, can I say, I was listening to that on the radio driving home from work, and I sent a mate a message and said, "Geez, it doesn't sound like there's too much going on the radio. It sounds a bit flat." And he said it looked like local level football.
Right.
And I said, "Don't be so offensive to local level footballers, please."
Yeah,
But
don't touch local footy.
I looked up, and there he was in the Weekly Times, because he also umpired in the bush on the weekend. So he umpired at Matoa in the Wimmera Football Netball League. It's as
Yep.
part of an outreach program that he's doing. And he was there mentoring Phoenix Hopper, I believe his name was, who's a young boy who was doing his first ever senior game. So I thought that was incredible. Well done to
Yeah.
Johnny. Well done to the AFL. It's about trying to create more pathways for local country umpires to
Yeah.
become AFL umpires. So I think that's great. You mentioned, Rob, at the start that there were some blowouts and there's some close ones. Well, one of our favourite leagues on this podcast, just because we talk about it all the time, so I think it's got to be one of our favourite leagues, the Ovens and Murray League. There were some absolute belters on the weekend, some absolute classics.
Keeps delivering, Pete.
Keeps delivering. Now, Albury versus Corowa at Rutherglen, a 2 point win to Albury.
Hmm.
Now, you look at that just off the bat and you go, that must have been an incredible game. Even more so when you consider that Albury kicked 6 goals in the last quarter to sneak home by the 2 points. So just incredible there. Paul Roos was at that game watching his son, and also helping out Cora Rutherglen, given that his former teammate Darren Creswell is there as coach. And we also know we've spoken a little bit about John Longmire having some impact there at Corowa Rutherglen as a former Corowa boy, but his brother is president there at the club. But there are also a couple of other thrillers in the O&Ms over the weekend. Yarrawonga beat Myrtleford by 10 points. So again, another really close game. And North Albury, the Hoppers, my lads, won by 5 points. So some absolute classics there in the O&M league, and it's just a league that keeps delivering, like you said. So I think it's one we'll keep our eye on as the season moves through.
Yeah.
One that you mentioned last year, Rob. It's a favourite of ours for the name, Congutna, the road. And at the minute, Rob, they are an absolute road because they are just steam lining through absolute everyone.
Steam lining. That's
Steam
a
lining, steam lining. I think I've tried to use two different things in
big
the one
metaphors.
there, but we're going to go with it. They are absolutely steam lining people, Rob. First 5 matches, they've won by an average of 99 points by 99 points or more. They have an average winning margin of 148 points, just a lazy 148 points. And they just beat Echuca United last weekend by 136 points. So going pretty well there at the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, we spoke a little bit about them last year, and I think they had an epic grand final last year. But at the minute, it looks like they are taking it to another level. So we'll keep our eye on the road and how they continue on. Tim Ryanetz played his 419th game for Creswick on Saturday, Rob. I think playing 100 games is pretty good for a club. Playing 200 is pretty much, the limit that a lot of country footballers get to, if even getting to that.
Yeah.
Playing 419 games, it's a club record for games across all grades. Absolutely incredible. I think what I'd like to know, Rob, is how many meters of tape have been used in those 419 games? How many milligrams of ointment have been rubbed into calves during those 419 games? How many hot dogs and pies have been consumed during that 419 game process? That's just incredible. I think we love to see that. I'd like to know what the record is around local football altogether.
Yeah.
I know I've heard of some people playing more than 419, but to play 419 games is amazing. So well
Very
done there
impressive.
to Tim and Central Highlands League there, which Creswick are in. I'm certain at some point we'll get to focus a little bit more on that league. But Rob, one of the things that we also like talking about on this podcast is breaking of losing streaks.
Hmm.
And we've had another one. It's the Nyora Saints, and they've broken their 21-game losing streak, beating Poowong by 45 points in the Allenbank Football Netball League. It's great to see. We always like to see that. Now, what we want to see is, can they turn it into a winning streak?
Yeah.
Can they go on and start to create the winning streak? I think we're going to take direct credit for all of the losing streaks that have been broken since we started this podcast.
Totally.
And I'm sure it's got nothing to do with the clubs that have recruited and got on a good coach and trained really well. It's just us two sitting here talking about who's going to break their losing streak next, I feel. So
Yeah.
well done to them. And I look forward to seeing if they get on that 2-game winning streak this weekend.
Just
And
let us know
finally,
if you need a losing streak broken. We're here to help.
correct. If you need a losing streak broken, we're here to help. When we say here to help too, we mean off field.
Oh yeah.
We're
We're
certainly
done.
not. We're not going to be helping anyone on field. That's dire straits if you're an on field. And finally, Rob, the Gippsland League. This is another really good league that we covered a little bit last year. I know that one of your paddock to premierships last year was the Wonthaggi Power. Well, Mafra have just upset reigning premiers Traralgon by 19 points. Traralgon, who were the reigning premiers, sitting seventh on 2-2. So it hasn't been probably the start they would have envisioned.
Mm.
Moe are one of the teams that have really staked their claim in the Gippsland Football League. They've beaten Lee and Gather, who's another fancied premiership contender, and they've beaten them to the tune of 47 points to take top spot on the ladder. So I think that's a league that we'll probably check in with a little bit more. But it seems like the Gippsland Football League is throwing up some really good results and showing that there's some pretty even competition there across that league. So that's what caught my eye, Rob, amongst a million other things that I probably could have mentioned. were we do we have license to do a an 8 hour podcast, which I'm not sure who would listen to that. So I think we'll keep it to that. But I'm keen to know, Rob, what's caught your eye and what you've been looking at over the week.
Well, I like listening to you talk about local footy, Pete, but even I wouldn't cop 8 hours, I don't think.
That's
Even
fair.
even I have my limits.
That's
Um,
fair.
anyway, um, yeah, look, as you said, lots of things caught my eye too. I did notice you mentioned a big comeback for Albury in the last quarter. I noticed a big comeback from Kilmore in the last quarter of the Northern Footy Netball League, and we should focus a little more on some of the suburban footy, I reckon, soon. But
For
yeah,
sure.
in the Northern League, Div 3, that is actually, Kilmore had only kicked 2 goals to three-quarter time against arch rivals Kinglake, but they nailed home 6 goals to one in the final quarter to get the job done there and to remain undefeated.
Wow.
So good work by Kilmore, good way to keep a streak going.
Definitely.
Um, we do like a big bag of goals on Got the 4 points, and pretty happy to report Josh Hawkins kicking 14 goals, one
Ooh.
for Yarra Glen. Now, mate, you and I were chatting about this recently. This is a nickname that had failed to come to our attention until now. The Yarra Glen River Pigs.
The River Pigs.
The River,
Wow.
the River Pigs. The River Pigs had a day out. They were actually playing Yarra Junction and they had a 119-point win, 14 goals won there. The coach reckoned that Josh Hawkins dished off at least six others. So, six other gettable chances. So he could have been going for 20, but anyhow, it's 14 goals won. Very impressive and very accurate in what
Very
I
accurate.
only assume is a pretty hyped up derby there, the Yarra Derby between the Glen and the Junction, between the River Pigs and I don't know what Yarra Junction are called. But yes, 14 goals won, Josh Hawkins. That's very impressive, taking
Uh,
after Tommy Hawkins.
That's very impressive. Although I would say, as a backman, I'm not sure I actually enjoy big bags of goals being kicked, mainly because I had a heap kicked on me when I used to play.
Yeah, I can't imagine that he played on the same fullback all game. You know,
Hope not.
you'd think after goal 7 or 8, maybe there might have been a change. Anyhow, look, Pete, I did want to focus a little bit on some of the blowouts this week, and we're going to get onto them in a sense in Victoria, but. First of all, I want to take you to Tasmania. I was alerted by Clay, a mate of ours from school as well, on Facebook. And by the way, everyone, feel free to reach out with any things you would like us to cover or things that you found interesting in local footy over the weekend. So thanks, Clay, for this one. I hadn't seen the results otherwise in the Northwest Footy Association down there in Tasmania, but they deserve mentioning, probably not for the right reasons. Let me just read you some scores, Pete. East Ulverston, 29 goals, 12, 186, defeats Sprayton, 5-5-35. That's 151 points.
Right?
Wesley Vale, 42 goals, 22, 274, defeat Turners Beach, 0-1-1.
Even
That's
less great.
273 points. I need to read you the close one.
Okay.
This was Motton Preston, 18 goals, 15, 123. Defeat fourth, 5-2-32. That's the close one.
Oh, I'm glad.
91-point margin there for Motton Preston. Um, and then the going gets really tough. Rosebery Toorak are currently sitting on the bottom of the Northwest Footy Association ladder with a percentage of 0.73 after losing 69 goals, 17, 431 to no score. I mean,
Mm.
to be honest, if you've had 69 goals kicked on you in a game, 69 goals, 17, that's actually pretty accurate when you think about it.
It's
Um,
very accurate.
yeah, anyhow, if you've had that many scores kicked on you, you probably haven't had any time to score yourself. Probably haven't had your hands on the ball. Pete, those results are pretty darn extraordinary. I don't know what the largest score is in local footy. I've forgotten it. I think it might be Campbell's Creek, in the Maryborough Castlemaine League against Primrose, who no longer exist. But boy, oh boy, Northwest Footy Association in Tasmania, something is a
Mm.
bit wrong there.
Yeah, definitely, Rob. That's brutal. I mean, the close one being 91 points is
Mm,
it's not a great sign.
no.
I think I'm with you. I think the largest score I'm aware of is Campbell's Creek beating Primrose. Um, I've actually just looked at it on my phone here. 134, 634 to get this three straight 18. Primrose kicked three straight. That's incredible. What
They took their
a
chances, Pete.
They took their chances. You could almost argue they've been hard done by there because obviously they've took their chances when they've come in. Maybe four inside 50s for
Yeah.
three goals straight. You can't
Mm.
argue with that as the coach. Probably, I think you'd probably say that that's play on. But yeah.
Mate,
So
the forwards in that game, the forwards are going to be like, boys, we did our job. You know, we probably converted 90% of our inside 50s. Come on, we did our job.
well, I do know that Craig Ginnivan, and that name might ring a bell to some people. That is the father of Jack Ginnivan. I know he kicked about 17, 18 odd. I think there was a whole host of players that kicked a lot of goals. Here you go. I'm reading a little bit further, Rob. All three of Primrose's goals came in the last quarter. So, what a huge last quarter for Primrose.
Oh,
They absolutely dominated. Um, because of time on, due to the amount of goals, the match is believed to have gone for 3 hours and 5 minutes. Um, so it wasn't even a quick one. Like Primrose weren't even like put us out of our misery. They were there for 3 hours going through that. So I wonder if they won the last quarter, Primrose. I don't know. I'll have to investigate further. Probably not at three straight in the last quarter to
no,
whatever Campbell's Creek
no.
kicked. But yeah, that is. Whilst we laugh, it is a serious matter of going. What do they do in the northwest there in Tasmania for to try and make that somewhat more equal
Yeah.
than what it clearly is. So thanks for that, Clay. That's a good one.
Yeah, and it actually does provide a segue too, Pete, because I want to continue on the theme. Now, I did wrestle the Footy Firestarter segment away from you last week, much to your chagrin, but um, due to the timings of when we had our respective busy evenings this week, I went ahead and I've stolen it from you
You
again.
you've got it
Now,
again. Two
I've
weeks in a
done a,
row.
I've done a little bit of research here, and I want us to talk about some of the big results in the Geelong Football Netball League. Now, um, football in Tasmania has got a very long and proud history, as we know, but the Geelong Football Netball League has a really, really long, proud history. Some of the clubs in this league going back well into the 1800s. We're talking about some of the oldest football clubs in Australia and the oldest incorporated clubs in the world, in fact, in organised football. And one of them is Lara. Nice little place there, not far from the bay on the western side, and just north of Geelong. Lara are the Cats. They wear Geelong jumpers, and they have a very proud and rich history in the Geelong Football Netball League down there. But they're going through a really rough patch, Pete. And I think, given that this is one of the strongest historically and proudest local football, country football leagues in Australia, these results deserve a mention and
Mhm.
kind of a bit of a call for help, I reckon, down there. Something's got to be done. So I've written here that we need to talk about the Geelong Football Netball League. Um, Pete, on the weekend, Lara played St Mary's, and they went down by 276 points. So we're not talking Northwest Tasmania, but we are talking 4-4-28 to 48 goals, 16, 304. Now, Lara have a percentage after 3 games of 12.89. Things are really grim down there. Um, but remarkably, being winless with a percentage of less than 13, they're actually not bottom of the ladder. That distinction goes to North Shore, who are on the bottom, also winless with a percentage of 5.75. Now, we do know from the pre-season, we covered a little bit about the situation at North Shore. They were issued a please explain by the AFL Barwon organisation with regards to whether they would even field teams in the Geelong Footy Netball League competition this year. They did get up to form a team, which is good. We certainly don't want to see clubs going into recess or folding, but clearly things are not very rosy there. So they lost to the reigning premiers Leopold on the weekend, 29-23, 197 to 2-2-14. I mean, actually, that result looks comparatively close
Mm,
compared to the almost 100 extra points in the margin there for St Mary's against Lara.
yeah.
Things are really struggling, I think it's fair to say, there at North Shore and Lara. To compound matters, Lara's big recruit in the off season was Majak Dor, and he actually played in the reserves on the weekend due to failing to meet training requirements for the club. And we know that there's a bit going on there. We understand through some of the reporting that there have been some mental health struggles for Majak Dor, and we certainly wish him all the best and hope he's back to full health physically and mentally and playing good footy soon because
Yep.
from all accounts in the reporting about that St Mary's Lara game, the coaches were saying that really it was men against boys. The
Mm,
coaches there at Lara, the senior coaches, are having to trot out 16, 17-year-olds
mm,
against really hardened bodies for St Mary's. And, you know, the message from the coaches in the wash up to this was that this is some of the worst experience that these people have ever had on a football field or at a football field. And these kind of experiences can be terminal, in the enjoyment of players playing in the life of clubs and the willingness of sponsors and volunteers to get involved. And so really something needs to be done down there in the Geelong Footy Netball League. Pete, the results in the reserves are no better. I won't go into too much detail here, but after 3 games, North Shore is on a percentage of 3.91. Also, of course, winless in the reserves, and Lara have a percentage of 12.91. So the reserves for both of those clubs are really struggling as well. And we know from other examples that in some cases, when clubs are really struggling, you get players having to double up from the reserves into the seniors. And I don't know what's going on down there, but things are really not very healthy. So I guess a couple of talking points without labouring it. I mean, those scores speak for themselves.
mm,
I guess I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are, Pete. What can be done? What should be done? Is this a symptom of big league struggling? We had an interesting chat with Brandon a couple of weeks ago, Brandon Weatherson from Carisbrook, and his impression was that in some of the cases around country footy, the district leagues are doing a little bit better in terms
mm,
of competitiveness. And we have seen a few examples of big leagues, some of those really famous, historic, prestigious big leagues like Bendigo and Ballarat struggling a little bit. So
mm,
we know Ballarat's had Lake Wendouree as a struggler in the last few seasons at least. And Melton South have left that league as of this season. We know Bendigo is losing clubs. They lost Maryborough recently. They also lost Kyneton. Kangaroo Flat are perennial strugglers, and they've sort of somehow accepted on board Broadford, who are in recess. We're not quite sure what's going on there. We probably should cover that in more detail another time. But is this a symptom, Pete, of the struggles of those big leagues? Given that, when I had a look at results in AFL Barwon's other affiliated league, AFL Barwon, things are a little more competitive. There were some big margins on the weekend, but we're talking like traditional big margins, you know, 10, 11 goals used to be a big margin, right? You
mm.
the thumping, you really weren't in the game probably
Yeah.
for the majority of it. They're the kind of margins we're seeing in the Bellarine League, and everybody's actually won a game in that
Yeah.
league. So to this point in the season now, um, there was a conversation going on early in the year that we covered a little bit that AFL Barwon was seriously considering a redistribution of those two leagues, the Geelong Football Netball League and the Bellarine League, in such a way that would allow relegation and promotion between those leagues. Is that something that can save clubs like Lara and North Shore in the short or the long term? Should they be thinking about drastic action to help these clubs even this season before we get to the end? Um, they're the things I think we need to throw around. And yeah, I'm interested in your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Geez, at this rate, I won't get Footy Firestarters back with what you're bringing to the table. Yeah, it's a really interesting, I suppose, situation that they find themselves in. Like intervention this season, I struggle to understand what that might look like. Like, clearly you wouldn't be able to move them back to the say the Ballerine League as part of that promotion relegation, because that would have permutations for what does that mean for the draws and the current Ballerine League, and
Mm.
what does that mean for the Geelong League. So I don't know what support this year could be offered other than maybe is there some form of like a loan system where if clubs have, players that are, surplus to the potentially requirements, especially some of those more hardened type bodies, is there the potential there for support there? I don't know. I don't know. Does the Ballerine or Geelong Footy League? Does anyone have the buy in that league? Like, could you borrow one's players from that? I suppose I'm saying I'm not sure what the support could be this year. I think it really shows what you had spoken about previously with that promotion relegation that they're looking between the Geelong Footy League and the Ballerine Footy League. I think that's one thing that clearly needs to happen. I can't remember from that, Rob. That was just one up, one down potential, and only the potential if one of the Ballerine League clubs wanted to actually come up. So
That's right.
the so the reality could be that if a Ballerine League club doesn't want to come up, then what's the story for North Shore or Lara?
Yeah,
Also noting again that I think it's points contributing to that over a period of time. So I don't even know whether North Shore or Lara are in danger of being one of the ones relegated. I would assume they probably are, given the success they've had in previous seasons. But I'd have to double check that to see if even
yeah.
it's a guarantee that they're in the gun should things not go well. Noting, of course, that doesn't just take into account senior football; it also takes into account other divisions of football and netball, I believe, from memory. So yeah, I think there is an element like what Brandon spoke around with the challenges between major leagues and district leagues, and I think what we're seeing, I think we're seeing that play out. Um, I don't see as much of a delineation anymore between the major and the district league. So if you're a player that's looking to go play footy, there's now just as much reason to go play in a district league as there is a major league. I don't really see what the carrot is that the major league has. I know they've got slightly bigger salary caps, but I mean
Not much.
the question would be: do you want to go play for North Shore in a major league, or do you want to go play for a district league club that's having success? That you could get almost the same salary, if not, the almost exact same, or maybe a little bit less. So I think it is interesting. I think the major leagues are struggling all over the shop. I think this is the first time ever the Bendigo Footy League has not had a league best and fairest playing in the competition. So to not have a league best and fairest from any year not playing in the comp, why not? Where are the players going?
Mm,
Where's last year's league best and fairest gone? Where's he gone? Like, has he gone off to another league? Where's the guy before the year before that? Where's he gone?
mm.
They've lost Kyneton to another league. They've lost Maryborough to recess. I think at some point, Rob, one of my footy fire starters will be them accepting Broadford into the league. It's the most bonkers move I've ever seen. I
Yeah.
don't get what they're trying to achieve for it. It's like it's clutching at straws, is what it is. So get ready for that episode. That'll be great. And Ballarat have had the same. They've had Melton South leave. They've certainly had clubs that have been struggling. I think of all the major league, Ballarat for me is probably the one that's coping the best. Outside of, I mean, Ovens and
Other than
Murray.
Ovens and Murray, yeah.
Ovens and Murray is clearly the one that is right up there. That is just, maybe they need to be looking at what they're doing to keep things so even and to keep the competition to such a great standard.
I think
Um,
there are others. I mean, I think Sunraysia and Gippsland leagues are typically more competitive too, and I think you'd put them in the major league category.
I would agree. Yeah. So I think it's interesting. One of the things that I also find interesting, Rob, you did mention there, like, years ago, a 10-goal loss would have been a belting. I wonder now with the structure and the way football is played, that 10 goals now actually isn't the belting. Like clearly it
Mm.
obviously isn't the belting, but teams are now playing that run and gun off half back that open the game up so much. That I think goals are plenty now, and I think you can find yourself, having 6 or 7 goals kicked against you in a quarter like that, and potentially the scoreboard looks really bad, but equally you've got the opportunity to kick 6 or 7. So I think that's interesting. But yeah, I don't know, Rob. What is your sort of what's your take on what you think needs to be done there in the Geelong Footy League?
Well, Pete, I was thinking about it from a VAFA point of view. We're strongly involved and interested in the VAFA, and it's actually been regrading week in the VAFA.
It has.
And we've seen this in some of the women's footy, where there have been some struggling clubs that have been regraded into other leagues, and some of the really strong clubs have been regraded up. It's also happened a little bit in the under-19s. Hasn't happened, as far as I'm aware, in the senior football. The
Not that I'm
relegation and
aware.
promotion in the VAFA is
Mm.
determined in the previous season. I, it'd be very, very tough, I think, in the Geelong Footy League to suggest to St Mary's, who are currently top of the ladder in the sorry, to Geelong Amos, I mean, who are currently top of the ladder in the Bellarine League, that they have to now go up and play in the Geelong League.
Yeah.
I don't think you could do that.
Just don't think it can work.
But I think there are enough teams in the Bellarine League and enough teams in the Geelong League that you could actually ask North Shore and Lara if they'd like to drop down and play in the Bellarine League. Yeah, you'd need to redo the fixture. That's true. That's true. But you'd be adding two teams, so you wouldn't be adding a bye. There would need to be some redistribution. Um, I just really worry that with margins that big already at the start of the season, they're going to lose players. They're going to have people lose interest. I'd be losing interest.
Mm.
Not not that I'm anywhere close to being able to play anymore, but if I was, and you're sort of thinking about, oh, should I go and take that study opportunity or should I go and travel around Europe when I've got a chance? Or will
Yeah.
I stick around and play for Lara and get belted in the reserves by 300 points? This is the danger. And it might sound silly. It does seem possible that even if they got redistributed into the Bellarine League, they might still be losing a lot of games by big margins at this level of competitiveness. Because I'm not
Potentially.
suggesting for a moment that the Bellarine League is weak.
No.
But it might be a difference between having literally two competitive games a season, which is going to be Lara v North Shore, versus maybe 5 or 6 competitive games
Yeah.
where they might be at least turning up in the morning thinking, okay, we're in the hunt here a little
Yeah.
bit,
Yeah.
But at this
No, you're
stage,
right.
I think there's really an argument for some kind of redistribution. And I don't know, we've seen with other leagues that petitions to go up and down between leagues have been voted up by the participants in one league and voted down by another. And I know one of your pet things is that maybe AFL Victoria should just step in and say, look, for the good of the game, we need to cop this. We need to just redistribute because we're at risk of losing 200-plus-year-old clubs if
Mm.
this kind of situation continues. So that would be my take on it. I
Mm.
would be advocating for some urgent redistribution and and perhaps even some pretty immediate point or salary cap relief for those two clubs to say, look, if you want to coax somebody out of retirement, if you want to manage to convince, Brennan Favola, I've heard that he's off to play a game from Masala Dandenong. I don't know. I'm throwing out
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
ideas, but I feel like it's just not healthy to have clubs in
Yeah.
these big leagues be so uncompetitive. I'd be pulling out all stops to
Yeah.
give them a chance to win more than one game here.
Yeah, it's a really
None.
good point. It's a really good point. And look, I mean, I haven't gone through the history books to see how North Shore and Lara have fared in previous seasons, like whether this is something that's been common or whether it's not. But I know just looking at premiers and grand finals, North Shore last played in a grand final in 2004. Lara were actually the premiers in 2002. And Rob, I was looking at it. North Shore won the premiership in '93 against Lara.
The irony.
Lara won the premiership in '94 against St Mary's. '95 North Shore beat Lara in the grand final. '96 North Shore won. '97 North Shore won. '98 North Shore won. '99 North Shore won. 2000 North Shore won again against Lara. And then finally the run was stopped in 2001 when South Barwon beat North Shore.
Goodness.
So clearly North Shore and Lara, this is not a case of they've been struggling for their entire existence. They've clearly had periods of absolute dominance, but it really feels like it's at a point where intervention is needed. So I think you're right. Um, so Rob, I think that's a really interesting one. We might need to keep our eye on what AFL Barwon and the Geelong Football Netball League do there with North Shore and Lara. For whatever the case, what they may or may not do. Geez, we might have to get around that North Shore v Lara match because that's going to
Yeah.
be absolutely
Gonna
huge.
be on.
If yeah, rest players for it, I reckon. Get them on ice now and get them ready for that game. But Rob, let's kick over to our final segment, our paddock to premiership. Let's go into seeing how our picks are doing. And look, I'll kick us off with my pick in Castlemaine. Disappointing, Rob. It was very disappointing. They lost to South Bendigo by 56 points. Now, South Bendigo, I think, look like they might be looking somewhat the goods this year. I think there's probably a bit of a Sandhurst, Eaglehawk, South Bendigo top three kind of forming. Castlemaine just didn't seem to get out of the starting blocks, had a really
Mm,
poor first quarter.
mm.
We're almost around 27 points down at quarter time. And it just sort of didn't get going for them. And they need to take a scalp, Castlemaine. The beaten Golden Square and Kangaroo Flat, who look like they're going to be rooted to the bottom of the ladder there in the Bendigo Footy League. And maybe that scalp comes this week. They're playing third on the ladder, Gisborne, at the Graveyard, Rob. So third v fifth. It's aptly named the Graveyard, can I say, because it's about 2 degrees there at Gisborne when you play. There's Gisborne people there, so that also makes it a bit of a graveyard. Yeah, there's a little bit of honest feedback for Gisborne, but if they've got any complaints, they can go back to the under 18s elimination final when Castlemaine beat Gisborne by a point. So that was a ripping game. Pat Ruggles killed a bloke. There is a video.
Metaphorically.
There is a there, I don't know. There's a video on YouTube of that hit. I tell you, I'm not confident. I mean, I saw the kid get back up and walk off, at the end of the game, but I'm still not convinced that he's not dead because Pat Ruggles absolutely killed him. But anyway, if anyone wants to watch that, just Castlemaine Gisborne under 18s, put something like that into YouTube and just watch one of them. Genuinely, if you watch that hit, that's a 12 week. That's 12 weeks these
Yeah.
days, and he didn't get cited for back those days. So yeah, good times. Anyway, what have you got for us in your paddock to premiership, Rob?
Good times and great classic hits. Uh, we don't condone 12-week warranting suspension hits on got the 4 points. I'm just going to put that out there. Look, Pete, where am I going to start here? I think I'm going to start with Fitzroy, with some serious trepidation. Um, they were my pick with the heart. I really thought they would rebound strongly in Prem B. They are now zipping four, having lost on the weekend to Old Camberwell. Old Camberwell have actually had a pretty decent start to the year.
Yep,
So, look, we've got to take our positives where we can find them, Pete. Maybe a 20-point loss to a
maybe.
strong Old Camberwell side is progress for Fitzroy. But the reality is, when you are in an extremely competitive Premier B league and relegation is on the line, honourable losses ain't going to cut it anymore for Fitzroy. They need to win, and they need to win now. They need to start getting on the board. Um, they need to stop thinking about finals. It's gone.
Yeah.
And even if it's not, look, it's gone. Yeah, let's just put it out there. Now, um, look, this really, I said it's must win, but it is absolutely must win because they're playing the other team in Prem B who's currently winless, and that's Hampton Rovers. Now, Hampton Rovers fans, of course, will be hoping that the shoe's on the other foot. They will be saying that they really need to win this game. I'm on the Roy's bandwagon. I hope they can get the job done. But I'm just going to put it out there, Pete, and say this off the bat, and I'm happy to be proven wrong if it comes to be not true. But the loser of this game will be relegated from Prem B. I think this league is just so competitive and so strong that there's
Yeah.
no way back for the team that loses this game. So I hope that that's not Fitzroy, and but the game is at Hampton, so it's going to be an away game for Fitzroy. They're going to have to go there and pull out all stops. And as we like to say in the VAFA, when the going gets tough, it's just got to be survival mode here for Fitzroy. They've got to lock down and get the W.
Yep, let's hope the Roys can breathe some life into their season and get survival mode underway because they desperately need to. And we both love Fitzroy, and yeah, I really want to see them stay up, but they've got to do something this weekend,
They're
otherwise it
making
won't
hard work
happen.
of it.
They certainly are. A team that isn't making hard work of it at the minute, Rob, albeit as I mentioned, they did have a really close game, is North Albury, the Hoppers. So they did have a 5 point win against Lavington. The O&M's equally looks like a really competitive league, but they are sitting third on the ladder currently, the Hoppers. So they are looking really, really good, and they do have a clash up against the Wodonga Raiders ahead, who are towards the bottom of the ladder. So hopefully the Hoppers can continue on, and they can keep winning, and they can keep putting themselves in a good spot on that ladder. I think in leagues where they've got so many teams, and the finals, becomes a little bit more important as to where you place yourself in that
Yeah.
final system. So hopefully they can keep marching on. But yeah, good on the Hoppers for getting the 5 point win over Lavington. But again, just shows the O&Ms is just one of the leagues that just continues to pull out classics.
The one to watch, yeah, absolutely. Um, Pete, my one of my other picks has had a pretty tough start to the year. Coringal Bulls. Nathan Burke coached Coringal Bulls down there in the Mornington Peninsula League. They didn't lose on the weekend, so that's exciting.
It's
But
great.
they actually didn't play. So yeah, it's a grim start to the season when you've got to start celebrating the non-losses in that context. But the whole league didn't play by the looks, so
Okay.
they have Devon Meadows coming up this week. Let's hope they can get on the board there for Berkey.
Yeah, let's hope so. And look, let's go from one of yours that didn't play to one of mine that didn't play. So Tulibuck Manangatang had the bye. So I think there's 11 teams in that comp, and so one team having the bye every week, and it was
Yeah.
Tulibuck's turn. They're sitting sixth on the ladder. They've had somewhat of a resurgence after a poor round one, and they are playing Swan Hill, who currently sit bottom of the ladder. So let's hope the Tulibuck boys can blow them out of the water and get a big win under the belt and continue the rise up the ladder.
But not blow them out of the water, Rosebery Tuberak style. Rosebery
Eh,
Tuberak, yeah.
Preferably not, but
Yeah,
who
yeah.
knows?
A competitive blowout.
Yes.
Um, Last one, Pete. Pyramid Hill. I've saved my best for last as I've been doing every time in the Paddock Premiership. 40-point win for the Bulldogs there over Bears Lagoon Serpentine. So Pyramid Hill doing well, sitting second on the ladder, 3-1. It did look to me from the pre-season wrap up that Pyramid Hill might be the strongest team in that league. Actually, Morong currently top of the ladder and undefeated. So good to see the Loddon Valley League looking quite competitive. Pyramid Hill in the fight there, in the hunt for a top two or three position. They're actually playing third on the ladder this weekend, who's Bridgewater, also 3-1. So that will be a classic up there for Pyramid Hill against Bridgewater, probably.
There you go. And I could be wrong. I feel Jared Harris, another one of our long-term mates, well, he was at Morong. I believe he was coaching the reserves and playing coach at the reserves at Morong.
There you go.
Could be very wrong on that. That could be completely off base, but I reckon he was there, and I reckon they've had a few premiership successes in recent times. Morong both
Mm,
over the seniors and the twos. So
yeah.
I'm not sure if he's still involved, but if he is, Morong look like they're still rolling on. So that's our paddock to premiership. We'll see how our picks go this week. It looks like all of our picks should have games this week. So
Yep.
so we won't be able to say that they didn't win, they didn't lose, just on the basis of the fact they didn't play. But hopefully the Kringle Bulls can give us something this week, and along with Fitzroy. But I think that's all we've got for this week's episode, Rob. It's been good to get into what's been happening over the last week. We didn't touch politics at all, other than your start, which is incredible for us. But certainly some interesting things happening out there in local footy. There's so many more leagues I know you and I want to cover that we haven't covered yet. So if you're watching this or listening to this, and you're thinking, oh, why haven't they mentioned us yet? It's just that we haven't gotten around to you yet. There's still so many more leagues that we do want to cover. So, but yeah, we do appreciate everyone. This, of course, being released out on YouTube. So if you want to watch us, feel free to watch us out on the YouTube. Otherwise, if you say driving somewhere, or you just don't want to look at our ugly mugs, then we do have the Spotify option so that you can listen to us and listen to our dulcet tones. You can listen to me say streamline and have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, because let's be honest, neither did I. But it's another big weekend of footy ahead, Rob. I'm excited to see what new stories this weekend brings. You mentioned Fev playing this weekend, so I'm sure there's going to be plenty of stories that are going to be coming to us for next week's episode. If you do have anything that you see, either flick something through to us on our Instagram or our email. Otherwise, we also just accept any messages into our Facebook Messenger, our personal ones, so that we can have some good content to talk about. And thank you, Clay, for clearly taking that opportunity and giving us that awesome. Well, I say awesome. It's a great
Grim.
story, but
Grim.
very grim results there in the Tasmanian footy. But that's us for this episode. We hope that your team gets the 4 points this weekend. And we look forward to delving into all of local footy again in our next episode. Have a good one.
See you next time.